Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of If Not Us. If Not Us is a series of candid conversations with people who are creating change around the world on all different topics. And today, I am pleased to be joined by Bami Kutei. Bami is, I will let you introduce yourself. I mean, she is a fitness instructor. She's a diversity, equity, and inclusion coach, and also has been in everything from tech to retail to probably many other things that I haven't even, to banking, right? So yeah, she's quite the woman, and we're just so excited to have her here today. I'm joined also by my fellow co-host, Sarah Ackerman. Sarah and I get to work together, and she is a master of the words, all the words. And she recently wrote a blog about the topic that we're going to be covering today. And with that, I'll dive in. Bami, would you want to introduce yourself in a better way than maybe I did, given your vast career?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Bami Kutei. I am a first-generation British Nigerian Canadian. I'm fearless. I'm an entrepreneur, founder of Bam Bam Boogie, Twerk After Work, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And what's a fun fact about me? And also, when I was 12, I was in a Harry Potter film. So I've done many, many things in my life, but I'm really happy to be here talking to you today.
Okay, we have to know, at the start, which Harry Potter film?
It was Order of the Phoenix.
Okay.
Yes! I was an extra. Yeah, I was an extra.
Can we see you? Like if we were to go to a certain
if you look really closely, you can see me in like the hall, like just scurrying past, but you have to look really closely.
Wow, this is great. Well, now I'm even more impressed. I mean, like we said, you've had quite the career going from, I'm not sure how someone combines dance, DEI, and banking and tech, but would love to just begin by digging into that part of your life. How does somebody, have such a diverse career? How did you get here?
I know. Sometimes I ask myself that question quite frequently, actually. I'm always like, how did I end up here? Like currently I am in Mexico, and I'm always asking myself, how did I end up here? So I actually started my career working very young. My first job was in retail, working for Tommy Hilfiger. And from a young age, I've always wanted a lot of autonomy, and I've wanted to be in control of like my finances and like having that freedom for myself. And it's always been that drive of saying yes and trying new experiences that has led me to my next career. So like I started off actually before Tommy Hilfiger, I was a tour guide like for new homes. So I was a new homes tour guide, Tommy Hilfiger. Yeah. Everything. And then I worked at the bank. I was a financial advisor for 2.5 years. And it was my experience working my way up very quickly in the financial industry that led me to Google, where that was my first job out of university. And I believe it was just the fact that I had done so many different things and had really excelled in different parts of my career. And although those skills didn't necessarily directly relate to digital advertising, it was the fact that I had so many transferable skills like communication and sales, things that you can always use for many different parts of your career. And I still use them today in entrepreneurship. So I believe that's how I've been able to pivot so much, is just really showcasing my strengths and the fact that I have so many transferable skills that I'll be able to use in any career that I decide to pivot into.
Yeah, I feel like that's really helpful. I feel like we're in a time now where we're making the shift from expectations. I feel like some of our parents and their parents would have expected to have one career. You just get in and you stay in and that's what you do. Whereas now I feel like people like ourselves look forward to doing diverse things in their career, all kinds of things. Do you have any advice for people out there who are professionals looking to make a change and how to find the next right thing, even if there isn't one right thing?
I would definitely say go within yourself and like literally take a look at the things that you've done in the past and things that brought you joy and things that other people told you that you were really good at, because that's when you're going to find your strengths and you're going to be able to showcase them the most. I feel like, you know, with this traditional school system that we have, we're always talking about our weaknesses and, you know, what are your areas of improvement. But when you want to get into a new career or start something new, it's really important that you showcase your strengths, because that's what's going to help catapult you and put you apart from other people who are also trying to get into that specific industry. So definitely look at your passions, look at what you're good at, what other people tell you you're good at, and really showcase those and hone those during the interview process, and also make sure they stand out on your CV or your resume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah. So during all like your career transitions, when like that's such an insightful thing of like following your strengths and following your passions, when did that solidify for you? Like that was going to be your trajectory and like following that as your North Star?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember at Google, it was like during the first 6 months, I believe, of the onboarding process, we had to do I guess it's like a book or a quiz. It's called Strengths Finders. Have you guys done it before?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We had to do the Strengths Finders quiz, and I feel like really reading that book and understanding more about my strengths, I didn't even realize that it was something I was already doing. I was already showcasing those strengths, but actually having it written down and knowing that, okay, these are the type of careers that I can excel in, and this is the way that I'm going to become more successful, is to continue doing these types of roles and showcasing the fact that I can win over others and I'm really good with communication. That was when it solidified for me, like, okay, like why would I focus on the things that I'm not good at, like, you know, maths and like numbers and data and analytics? Why shouldn't I just follow the things that I'm good at and just keep going from there?
I think you're in good company. We're both big fans of words, not so much the math. At least I speak for myself, but yeah. I really liked what you said too about kind of how once you define those things that you're passionate about and also your skill sets, you really could apply those to in many different circumstances. You know, it's not just like one size fits all. You might have several jobs and make use of those skills in all of them, because so many things draw on, like you said, being good at communication and good with words and good with people. So I appreciate that. I would love to move into talking about the issue. This has been a great, fun start to the conversation, and now we can dive in to this whole idea of imposter syndrome. And just at the top, you know, I think it would be helpful if we could hear from you. What's your definition, or how would you help people define what is imposter syndrome?
So for me, imposter syndrome is defined by you getting a job or a new relationship, something that you've gotten based on your own merit and your own previous successes. But for some reason, when you're actually in that role or in that relationship, you feel as though you're not worthy of being there. It's a lot of internal dialogue, imposter syndrome. It would be hard for someone else to diagnose you with imposter syndrome without you really explaining to them how you're feeling. A lot of people, especially women and women of color, minority groups, actually do get imposter syndrome a lot, especially when starting new jobs and new career roles. But a lot of people don't actually realize that they have it until they understand what the definition of it actually is.
Yeah, kind of a hidden thing. I wonder if you'd be willing to share how you first became aware of imposter syndrome and what that experience was like in real life.
So I remember when I started I feel like actually before I even started in the tech industry, I probably suffered from imposter syndrome before, but I didn't actually know what it meant at the time. So I had no idea what I was going through. But specifically starting at Google, so my journey to get there was I lived in Toronto, and you know, I did really well at university, studied at the University of Toronto, and I got the job at Google, I think even like 6 months or 3 months before I even graduated from university. So Of course, I'd worked really hard, went through 5 interviews all the way from Canada, different time zones, and then they even flew me over to Dublin and paid for me to relocate. So of course, they
Wow.
really loved what I did at such a young age, and they really loved me for that role. But for some reason, when I arrived and I saw that I was the only Black woman out of a group of 50 nooglers, they call them, it's like new Googlers, like tech
Nooglers.
terms.
Oh.
Yeah, tech
Oh.
terms. And seeing that, like as soon as you walk in, like it's just obvious. You can see the room is looking at you. I'm looking at them. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the first time I've been in this situation. And it was then, like, it was quite quickly that I realized, like, oh my gosh, like, am I here just because of the way I look? Like, did they just need one Black person to join this like Noogler group? Is that why I'm here? And it was like me, the Black woman, then there was a South Asian woman, and then there was another Asian woman as well in the group. And then I was like, okay, is this like they're just picking very specific? And we all had UK passports, so we'd all kind of have a UK citizenship. So I was thinking, like, is this something? And then my mind just starts to spiral out of control, and all the thoughts that I had on the plane traveling to Dublin, like, I've done so well, I'm so proud of myself, like everyone's going to be so proud of me as well, they just all washed away because I was like, I thought to myself, I didn't actually get this because of how hard I worked. I just got it because of the way I looked, which of course was not true. But that story, once that story starts in your mind, it goes over and over and over. And it truly affects the way that you see yourself, not just at work, but then your other experiences previously, and then the way that you communicate with people. I went from being very bold, outgoing, and very chatty and smiley to very withdrawn, really quiet. Like, if you asked my teammates, they would say that when I first joined, they were like, oh yeah, Bami, she didn't say much, very quiet, not really out of her shell. Like, I would just whisper on the phone, like to clients under the table. I was good at what I did, but I was just not confident in myself. And that was really, really obvious because of the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, how did you even begin to realize that's what it was? You know, I feel like it sounds like you were going through all of these, you know, performing at your job well, but also experiencing such hard things internally. And to your point, it's something that you don't even realize it's a thing. How did that kind of knowledge break over? What was the breakthrough that led you to be like, oh, this is what this is, and this is not something that's unique to me. I'm not having like a personal, an individual thing that no one else, like this is a real thing that I'm experiencing.
I think the thing about imposter syndrome is, like, once you tell yourself a narrative and a story about yourself over and over again, you truly start to believe it and internalize it. So although I wasn't an imposter at first, I then started to become an imposter because I was not myself. I was not showing up to work as my fullest self. I was not adding my own personal culture to the organization because I was trying to be someone else, being that kind of imposter and just trying to blend in. So when I actually found out about imposter syndrome, it was way after I'd already overcome it. It was the point where I had started Bam Bam Boogie. I had started working out, feeling more confident about myself, starting to realize, hey, I'm popular, I'm friendly, I'm helping other people get jobs, I'm outgoing, like, so I am truly being an imposter because of this syndrome that I'm going through. That's when I realized, like, hey, that was not me. So it wasn't until like 6 months after, and I came and I grew into myself and I realized, hey, I'm here because I earned it and I definitely deserve to be here, even to the point where I was like, they need me more than I need them.
Yes.
So, yeah.
What steps did you take to start to, like, did you consciously take steps to be like, this is not who I am, and work in like incremental, I'm going to be louder, I'm going to, whatever the step was? Or was it just kind of a natural transition of, without thinking, you came out of your shell and became back to who you were originally, like why they hired you?
It was definitely intentional because I knew that something was wrong. Like, I think it was 6 months in, because that's when I started Bam Bam Boogie. It was 6 months in, or like maybe 5 to 6 months in, I realized this is not who I am, and it's starting to really affect me. It even started to affect the way that I viewed myself. Like, when I looked in the mirror, I would just be like, who is this person that is even looking back at me so much? That I was like, no, I need to be the change that I want to see. I don't want the next Black woman or person of color to come into this organization and feel the same way and have the same cycle all over again. So it's like, I need to change in order to break the curses that would go forward, because of course there are other people who are going to come and feel the exact same way. So that's when I decided to start going to the gym, start working out, and start Bam Bam Boogie as a way that made not only more the fitness industry and the fitness space like gyms more inclusive and diverse, but also the organization as a whole, because I saw it as, if I had Bam Bam Boogie to come to when I started at Google, I would have felt like much more comfortable networking, maybe talking to other people who looked like me and could also, in a very safe space, discuss how they felt and how they overcame their imposter syndrome. And instead of waiting 6 months to overcome it, I'm sure I would have overcome it much faster.
Mm-hmm. And you actually brought in Bam Bam Boogie, which I love. I'd love to hear, I think that story ties so well into your journey of freedom and personal liberation. Will you tell us how that kind of began and that initial, what were the seeds of Bam Bam Boogie?
Yes, so Bam Bam Boogie started as a 20% diversity and inclusion project at Google. So for those of you who don't know, when you work for certain tech companies, they'll give you like 20% of your time where you can use it to do something that you are passionate about, that also fits in with the company's OKRs and the objectives that they have. So I decided to put mine into diversity, equity, and inclusion because it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I thought, what better way to do it than through dance and fitness, something that I'm so good at, but is really not valued enough in society. Like dancing and fitness in general is so good, or just movement in general, not necessarily fitness, is so good for your mental health, not just your physical health, because it's scientifically proven to release endorphins and help cure things like depression and anxiety because of the hormones that it stimulates in your body. So I thought, what better way than to help people feel included and to help them network across organizations whilst also understanding a bit more about different cultures and celebrating them, than to bring in some dance and some fitness. So that's how Bam Bam Boogie was born and became the fastest growing Googler-led program, like fitness, dance fitness, diversity, inclusion program in Google. So yeah, that's how it started.
What a great story. I mean, it makes me want to sign up for Bam Bam Boogie. And I think one of the things I'd like to hear you talk about as well is, when we spoke earlier, you've talked about how oftentimes people of color are the people who I think I remember reading this on your website, but are often not going to the gym or fitting in or finding community in those kind of fitness areas. So love to hear your thoughts about that. And then also how is this part of coming, where did this fit in your journey of sort of self-realization and realizing that you were suffering from imposter syndrome?
So yeah, when we look at the fitness industry or just sports in general, there are actually a lot of cultural and financial barriers to entry. So say, for example, swimming or lacrosse or hockey, these types of sports are quite expensive, and you have to be able to have access to a swimming pool, have parents who can pick you up after school and drop you off, things like that. And these are things that we don't think about, of barriers to entry to when you grow up and then you want to go to the gym. So if you're not already conditioned in your family and in your culture to do sports and it's not celebrated, then it's going to be hard for you to want to go to the gym and feel motivated to even go into the fitness industry when you're older. So I noticed that in the gym space, in the fitness industry, that it's not as diverse as it truly should be. We see, especially Black people, people of color, really boxed into certain sports like, American football or basketball, but there's actually a huge array of other sports that they aren't fully included in and, push forward into. So when I wanted to start my journey, I let people know that, hey, listen, I was not a track and field girl. I was not doing sports. All I did when I was younger was literally dancing and acting. So I am not a sports person, but I'm still able to be in the fitness industry and start in the fitness industry at 22, 23 years old. So if I can do it, this is for you too. This is accessible. You don't need to really invest much to dance. It's all you need is literally your body.
Yeah, yourself. Um, Another interesting thing you had shared with me, I think, was around dance as an equalizer. You know,
Mhm,
for Googlers at the time, it's like when you're all dancing and moving, you're not as aware of like hierarchy or
mhm.
whatever. So I think that's a really neat aspect of that as well. And I wonder, you kind of touched on this, but just still on the individual level, you mentioned that it's not really it's hard to recognize imposter syndrome in others. Is that something you would say, like, are there things we should be watching for in our colleagues? Um, is there a way that we can be supportive? Yeah,
Mm.
would love to hear your
Yeah,
thoughts.
most definitely, especially for more minority groups that are entering your organization. Yes, diversity is incredible and it's great when you have a diverse team, but inclusion is so much more important because you'll start to see that, if your team isn't inclusive, you'll start to see these minority groups start to drop off, or there might be complaints with HR because of the lack of inclusivity in the team. So recognizing imposter syndrome, or if something's not right with one of your colleagues, is the first way to be inclusive. So especially if you're a hiring manager or a recruiter, it's important that you don't just get that person into organization and just say, all right, I've hit my targets. It's go time. Let's move on to the next one. It's important to track their progress, at least have a plan in place for 6 months to do maybe monthly check-ins,
Mhm.
bi-weekly check-ins to see how exactly they're doing and to recognize, is this the same person that we are they behaving the same way that they behaved when during the interview process? Yeah, so I think that's really important, is just to recognize these things and recognize certain behaviors and have those check-ins. Also, to recognize imposter syndrome or to support it is to ensure that there are employee resource groups
Mhm.
to ensure that people feel as though they have safe spaces where they can speak up as to whether they're feeling imposter syndrome or they understand about it. And last not but not least is definitely trainings. I wouldn't have known about imposter syndrome unless it was communicated to me. So I think I heard it in one of the talks that we had, or through another employee. So I think it's important to also have those trainings so people understand what it even is.
Yeah, I think that brings me to kind of my next question, which is about, yeah, we're hearing a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI in the workplace. We have, I think the events just all around the world, but of last year and then this year have really put us in a context where people are having a real another reckoning with this issue. And one of the biggest places, where we spend most of our time, a lot of us, is at work. And so I wondered if you could help us, from putting on your hat as a DEI consultant, if you could help us understand sort of what is the role of the workplace. You mentioned creating groups and whatnot, but would love to hear you expand on what you think the role of and that relationship between the workplace and um, the employees, and then personal life, like how does that all tie together? um, yeah, would love to hear what you have to say about that.
So do you mean in how to support your employees, like in terms of what's going on in the world, their personal life, and then also within the organization itself?
Yeah, and I think I just love to hear your thoughts on how do all those things fit together. There's so much work that happens at the individual level,
Mm,
um, for all of us as just you know everyday people going around in the world, and then there's ourselves at work,
mm,
and that's always a hard barrier to figure out, I know, in a lot of places. But then even more so when you're adding in this DEI work that has to happen at the organizational level and the for each person individually.
mm. I think regardless of the size of your team or your organization, transparency is key. That's really
Hmm.
the first thing that you can do, is be very transparent from the beginning. It's transparency in your marketing materials, in your recruitment process, in your, escalation process if anything goes wrong, in your compensation plan. The more transparent you can be, even on your morals and your mission and your belief, the clearer it's going to be for the employees to know how they can be supported if anything happens, or if something's going on in their personal life or politically with any type of movements that are going on, how they're actually able to speak about it in the workplace. Because the more transparent you are on which organizations that you support and which communities that you feel like you want to speak up for at a certain time, the easier and the safer of a space it's going to create within the organization, regardless if you have 2 or 2,000 employees, because they just know that, okay, if this is what my organization publicly stands for and publicly continuously declares on their LinkedIn and their website and their social media profiles that, either it's the BLM movement or it's, LGBTQIA plus movement that they're supporting, then if they're saying it, then I feel comfortable to speak up to and have these conversations in the workplace, because I always know that my employer will have my back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sarah, you recently wrote a blog, I think I mentioned at the top of the episode, about this.
It's a depressing thing to write.
Yeah.
So it was based on last June, when all of the corporations came forward and posted the blackout square and made overtures of this is how we're going to change. When that data was first pulled, I think it was about 6 months later, some very nice person on the internet went through and fact checked between what did you say you were going to do, and publicly what have you done? And about 75% of the organizations haven't done anything. Mm-hmm. And it just goes to show that you can if you're speaking about it, that's great, and if employees feel appreciated and included, that's exactly what we want. But actually following through on a lot of those things, that's different. And a lot of folks, a lot of those major corporations at least aren't making that sort of information public.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know your opinion on do you need to show the work and show hey, we said we were going to do this and this is how we've executed on it? Because that would make sense. Or is there something to be said for kind of just being quiet, doing the work, and letting your DEI initiative show in other ways?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good question. I like that question because it's very two-folded there. But that what you mentioned about saying what you're going to do versus actually doing it, that is called performative activism. And ever since the events last June, and even before that, from 2016, kind of the first wave of when these things started to pick up, there's been a lot of performative activism with organizations, with influencers, with individuals. And because of social media being so easy for you to be able to share and disseminate information, it's become even more prevalent that people are just saying things but not actually doing it. So it's really important now more than ever that organizations such as Media Corps like yourselves are showing the work that you're doing. Like I said, whether it's through LinkedIn posts or on your website, these initiatives need to be front and center. There's no point in doing something and being quiet about it, because I promise you, if you won an award for best tech agency, best media agency, you would be telling the world about it. It would be at the end of your email signatures. It would be on your pitches to clients. So why are you not doing the same with your DEI work?
Mm-hmm. Amen. I mean, I feel like we just went to church with that moment. Great. I wonder too, around Sarah's question, is there a way to hold employers accountable to the goals that they've set? I mean, I can imagine if you're in a workplace, say you are at one of these corporate businesses, it can be kind of scary to be the one who's whistleblowing, for one thing. I mean, but is there a way that we as the public can also be holding people accountable?
Most definitely. I believe there was a letter around June last year where hundreds of organizations signed Creative Equals saying that they were going to make, these changes. And I personally reached out to, I'd say about 60% of those businesses on LinkedIn and just said, hi, hello, you said you were going to do this. Have you done anything? If not, this is the services that we offer. Like, it's time to put your money where your mouth is and start putting in some action into these things that you want to declare, because it's nice for you to declare it. But if you're not actually doing the work, then it's important for you to let us know too. So I think the accountability needs to be with the organization themselves, but also with the public as well. For example, any organization that puts out a letter and says, these the organization who signs it, just like you said, Sarah, 6 months later, they need to put another letter out saying, hey, these are the people that haven't done what they said they were going to do. Because when you publicly declare it, that's when it becomes real and people start to kind of rally up to it. And the same thing goes within the organization. It doesn't matter where you are in your organization, whether you're senior level or lower level. It's really important that you speak up and that you either write an email or submit something anonymously and just, let people know that this needs to be done and there needs to be some actionable change.
Powerful words. And like you said, I feel like, yeah, public declaration. If you want an award, why wouldn't you say it? So you should say what you're doing. But then also, once you've said it, you put it out on the table, and it's fair game for the world to ask you what you've actually achieved or done. There are so many other things that I'd like to ask you about, but I wondered if at the bottom of this episode you have any messages you'd like to share for people who might be experiencing imposter syndrome right now.
It's hard because it's such an individual thing, and imposter syndrome, it shows up differently in every single person. But if I could personally speak to my 22-year-old self who was going through imposter syndrome at Google, I would just say, remember why you're here, and remember your why of why you came here, and why you're going through this journey today, because that's exactly what's going to keep you going. Because imposter syndrome isn't just something that's cured and then you move on. I still have imposter syndrome sometimes, when I either work with new clients or, I win a really big pitch and I'm going into that office, like I get imposter syndrome again. So it's really important to go back to that why of why you're truly there. And my why is always to just make my ancestors proud and, to make them show that, what, all your hard work back in the day was not in vain. So remember your why, and that's what's going to keep building you up when these feelings arise again.
That's beautiful. I'll have to keep my why. I'm going to write it down and put it on my desk.
Yes.
And then is there any message for businesses who want to make positive progress in their DEI work? And also, shameless, but this might be a good time to tell us where we could find your information.
Yes, so definitely invest in the DEI work that you have committed to, like whether it's investing in a workshop or a talk, a training about unconscious bias. It's so important to put your money where your mouth is, because this isn't something that is just going to go away. It's only getting bigger and bigger as our Generation Z, our TikTokers start coming into the workforce. These are the things that they're looking at. They're looking at organizations that are focused on social justice and are focused on change in the DEI space. So if you find yourself falling behind, it's only going to impact your bottom line going into the future. So if you would like to invest and start to even have that conversation about where you can get started with your DEI efforts, definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn at Bami Kate or email alicia@bamikate.com to find out how we can have a credible solution for your organization.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and just to reinforce that, we met because you hosted a DEI workshop on unconscious bias. And I believe you'll be hosting another one for us coming up about imposter syndrome. So yeah, we just really benefited a lot from it. And I think, to your point, as these things come up, they highlight the problems for us, but they're not going away. And it can be really overwhelming, I think, as an organization, as a business, to figure out, oh, shoot, what are we supposed to do? But I think having expertise like yourself to guide people through that process of even figuring out where to start is really helpful.
Mhm.
This has been so wonderful, Bammy. It's
Thank you for having me.
really enjoyed our conversation and can't wait to have you back with us. If there's any resources you'd recommend, I'd love it if you wanted to share resources or books or readings or anything else that you found helpful.
I'd say the best resource would be How to Talk. What's the name of the book? How to Talk. Oh, no, this is the one I want to recommend. Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Google that book, or read that book, understand the history, and then, you're going to get a lot of resources from there about how you can move forward. So Why I Am No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Google that book, get that book. It's on Audible, and start your journey from there.
Well, great. This has been an excellent conversation. We'll put all the resources below the episode or on the webpage, on the blogs, all the things, all the links. This has been Bammy Kutei and Sarah Ackerman and myself. And great conversation.
Thank you.